So transition services applies to children once they turn 14 years of age. Under the federal law, it used to start at 16, but Massachusetts law changed to put that at age 14. And what we're really trying to do is look at a child before they reach adulthood to see what services do they need that are going to prepare them for either future education, further education, going on to college, or a junior college, community college, and future employment, so that they can go out and make a living for themselves and be, economically self-sustaining individual, and also the area of daily living skills. So what we want to do is look at the child when they're 14 years of age and start to develop a plan and determine what services are necessary to move the child forward in that area. I really just copied the sections of the law so that people could familiarize themselves with what transition services are meant to be. And it's a coordinated set of activities for a child with a disability. And it's saying that it's a results-oriented process. What do we want the outcome of these services to be? Post-school activities, including post-secondary education, vocational education, integrated employment, continuing adult education, adult services, independent living, or community participation. So it goes beyond the four walls of the school building. Does your child need services that are going to help them understand how to take public transportation, how to go onto the internet and map out a route for the MBTA, that I'm going to get on the bus here, I'm going to travel to this stop, and I'm going to get off here, and then I'm going to be able to go to my doctor's appointment, or I'm going to be able to get to my place of employment. Travel services using public transportation, all of that can be included within transition services. So transition services is something that you want to start thinking about as the child's getting older. Some children are going to require less transition services because their disability doesn't impact them to that extent. Some children, like my own child, is going to require a lot of transition services in terms of there's just more areas that need to be addressed. The goal of special education is not simply to pass your curriculum grade, the general education curriculum. The purpose of special education is to prepare you for independent living out in the community. So what does your child need to be able to do? And as they get older, I'm not talking about when they turn 14, we're going to start the job out, in the community, but we're going to start talking about what do you want to do later on in life? What is the child's interest? It really needs to be outcome-oriented process, but it needs to be focused on what is your child interested in doing. We don't want to be looking at developing transition services and having employment opportunities and job coaching and job shadowing and job mentoring for a child in an area that the child completely has no interest in. That's not going to be a successful thing. So the child's input is something that's important in the transition services to the extent it's appropriate. Some children will not be able to participate in that process, and their parents are going to need to take that responsibility on. But many children, and the majority of children, aren't going to be able to participate in that process. And that's when you want to start to talk to your child about what is it that you want to do, after school. Do you want to go on and get a job? Do you want to work in a trade? Do you want to go to college? Where do you see yourself going? For some kids, it's going to be more basic services in terms of helping that child learn how to go grocery shopping, helping that child learn how to, go to the bank and make a withdrawal. It really comes back to the child, but it's saying if you want your child to be more independent, and some kids are never going to be completely independent, but the goal is still towards getting them to greater independence and less reliant on other people across their day and across their life, because unfortunately there's going to be some day that we're not longer here as their parents. So you want your child to have as much independence as possible to help them, get along in life. And for some kids it's going to be less services, and they're just going to need some additional services to get them out into the workplace, and then they're going to be able to fly on their own. But they might need some support before they're able to do that on their own. So you really want to look at what is it that my child wants to do next, and what skills does my child need to learn in order to be able to make that dream or that goal a reality. And that's what the transition process is about. It's supposed to start at 14, so that we're not scrambling when the child's 18 or 21 years of age and exiting special education and we haven't begun that process. It's really saying, let's start it out slow, let's figure out what the child needs, and as you introduce those services year after year, then obviously the child's going to be acquiring more skills, and hopefully they'll be requiring less support as they get closer to the age that they're ending their special education career, whether it's through a high school diploma and passing the MCAS, or whether it's because they need to stay in special education until they're 22 years of age, and then they're going to try to access adult benefits. So I gave examples on the next page, if you have it, of transition planning and sort of what the annual transition planning form. So a transition planning form is something that needs to be made out for every child 14 years and older. It's part of the IEP process. It's a separate form, and it really talks about what is the action plan for my child in terms of what are we going to be focusing on in the areas of transition. And you're going to identify goals that you want your child to achieve, and then you're going to tie into that what services need to go along with that. You know, does my child need assistance? Some kids it's going to be something as basic as reading community signs. Did your child know what danger is? Does your child know how to summons help in an emergency, you know, in terms of calling 911? Or is your child ready to go into the workforce, but they need practice and assistance in doing interviews? You know, you can do mock interviews with kids. Do they know how to write a resume? Do they know how to fill out a job application? Do they know how to apply for their learner's permit and their license? Or do they need those materials modified for them? And then they need to go over them with somebody, an adult, to support them with that. And then eventually they'll be able to acquire that skill. But getting them there is going to take more than it would for another child. So that's really what you want to look at, and it's not constrained to anything. It's really saying, what does your child need to move on to more independence? So I gave some examples in terms of what can occur in terms of the, you know, an apprenticeship, and there's services where the adult goes into the workplace with the child and someone can model for the child. I mean, I don't know about other people, but I'm a visual learner, so if I see someone do something, I'm much better able to replicate it and do the same thing that they did than if I read it on a piece of paper. You know, if you show me how to do it, I might need, you know, a couple of times, but if you show me how to do it, and that's sort of what the apprenticeship is, and sort of the mentoring. It's sort of someone that's going to guide your child and support your child and show your child how to participate in a workplace task and a workplace job. And then, you know, once your child gets that practice and repetition, then obviously that support is faded over time to give your child more independence, because that's the goal of special education, is to move them towards greater independence. But transition planning is really recognizing that children with disabilities need services beyond what happens in the school and what can happen in the school. It happens in the community, it happens in the workplace, it happens out in terms of, you know, the community, I say, in terms of going to the mall and being able to buy yourself something and knowing what it, you know, you need the skills, not just math in terms of doing the math worksheets at school, but able to do money transactions. I mean, I realize they're a lot less now because everyone's swiping cards, but you want your child, if they do a transaction and they're getting change for their $20 bill, to know that they got the correct change and to know what it is that they needed to pay. So it's it's sort of backing up those skills to say, okay, what do we need to go out into the community to be able to participate, be successful in the things that we're participating in, and to be able to lead towards greater independence as they become adults. Because the children that don't get these services, they're obviously going to become more reliant on governmental services when they get older. And governmental services as an adult are not a right. Special education services are a right, and because we have the IDEA and we have, you know, the state law in Massachusetts, it's much stronger. That provides our children with rights for special education services. Once you age out or you graduate out of special education, adult services are benefits. So you basically get in line, and unfortunately, because of the economic situation that society's been in, that's been an area that's taken a lot of hits. So kids that need those services, you know, they're young adults, they get in line and they get what's available, and when there's no more available, there's no more services available. And unfortunately, the majority of kids with disabilities are the kids who are unemployed and are sitting at home and are not out in the community participating. So it's through the transition process and the transition services that you really want to look at that preparation for adulthood and sort of, you know, capitalize on that opportunity during those years so that when your child gets to be an adult and is no longer eligible for special education services, they've had that preparation and they've had those opportunities and they've been able to get those, you know, chances to be out in the community and doing things and practicing the skills they're going to need for when special education is no longer a part of their life. So at the bottom of the second page, and again, if you don't have it, we'll send it to you. What I tried to do was give you the specific contacts within BPS that are currently assigned as supervisors, and they have, you know, they're dealing with children within this age group, either in middle school. A lot of kids are turning 14 years of age at the middle school level, and then the high schools, and then also someone that's been assigned to the issue of transition. Transition has been an area that SpedPac has been asking to be a priority. We have a lot of areas that we're trying to address within special education, and I know that John Beer is working very hard on, you know, on as many as he possibly can within circumstances where budgets are being cut instead of increased. And so we've had the issue of increasing inclusion and addressing the issues with ADA, but transition remains an area that we really need to focus on because it's an area that all districts have not done a great job with in the past, and it hasn't been a particular focus. But there's been recent case law that's come out of the Bureau of Special Education Appeals that will look at the issue and whether or not a child has gotten appropriate transition services. And where they've not, then the BSEA has awarded additional services that may actually extend then beyond a child's age of 22. It's not extending their special education eligibility. It's saying that because services were not provided during that time, they're now owed services for that time. And fortunately, that's gotten attention of a lot of districts, and they're now trying to work on this area because it is an important area, you know, for all the reasons that I've already stated. So it's something to be aware of. It's not really, it's not talked about as often as sort of, you know, that whole IEP process and the goals and objectives, but it's an important area of special education that you want to be aware of if you have a younger child, and obviously more knowledgeable about if you have a child that's older, either 14 or over, and you want to look at that piece of your child's IEP and what have we done to assess the child's needs in those areas. You know, what assessments have been done, whether they want to go on to college, get a job, or live on their own, or all three, you know. I mean, most people's lives involve, you know, people without disabilities, a lot of them involve all three. You go on to school, you know, and then you go on and get a job, and you live on your own. So it's not mutually exclusive. It's just saying some or all of those may be appropriate for your child. So again, this is really just an introduction piece, because I've tried to get 2 workshops in within one meeting, and obviously if there's a greater interest in this specific area, then I'd be willing to do a longer, more in-depth workshop on it, but it's to let you know that this is also an important area for your child, and that it is something that we are focusing on as a priority within SpedPac, and obviously what we learned from the district and the changes that are made, we'll continue to update you on throughout the year and you know, beyond. That's it. Thank you.
Carolyn.